Yeah, I've got to go to another meeting, so. I'm here for announcements.
So while we're getting going, I do want Holly to come up and talk about a special event that we're having this
Special events.
Thursday,
Yes.
right?
So first of all, we're having a blood drive on Wednesday. The sign-up's out there by the mailboxes. If there's not a slot, just go ahead and come. The bus will be in the parking lot from 12 to 4 is the first thing we've got going on. And then on Thursday, to reward everybody, we're having given blood and having a successful blood drive. We're having our Cinco de Mayo party. And it's going to be from 1 to 3. We have multiple sponsors. It's on Facebook, but we have a professional bartender who's created 3 margaritas for us that he'll be mixing up. So we'll have a bar here in the hallway. We'll have the McCoys and Brad Mattern grilling fajitas out on the back porch here. We'll have decorations. We have Fairway sponsoring a piñata that's an adult piñata. So it has gift cards in it and miniature alcohol. We'll be doing that out here on the back side of the building as well. You've never seen a bunch of adults turn into it's like 5-year-olds at a birthday party when that piñata breaks. So we've got that going on as well. And then
Molly Irwin.
next Thursday, we have Red Day. So you haven't already signed up for it. It's a day where
That's it.
it's a day where everybody in Keller Williams, all over the world, dedicates a day to giving back to their community.
Okay.
And we're working with Emily's Place again this year. We'll be doing some painting on the inside and outside of some of their buildings. We'll be doing landscaping, some organizational projects and things like that. You can order, I think the cutoff has already been for the shirts, but just wear a red shirt. If you didn't get one, it's no big deal. Dress comfortably. We'll meet here at 9 o'clock in the morning. We'll have breakfast. We'll carpool over there. It's off of Avenue K. We'll work. Lunch will be provided, and then after that, we'll be going to have a happy hour afterwards to celebrate everything that we did together that day. So it's like one of the best days, just in KW, but especially here. So Cinco de Mayo, not to be missed, next Thursday from 1 to 3. Red Day the following Thursday from starting at 9 o'clock in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon. This is how long we go, 3 to 4, and then we go have a nice spread for a cocktail hour after.
You have enough materials back there? We good? Good.
Yes. Oh, and everybody make sure to sign in the bus so that we know that you were here, you're physically in the back.
Did you sign in?
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you explaining to us. Zoom people, can you hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, we good? Okay, good. Thank you. Have our materials? Have you read them? You read the materials? Any questions? So I'm done. Oh, Ms. Wanda, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Better every day. Yep. Absolutely. Walking around without anything to help me, so it's great progress. Now, the materials you have are, start off with advertising rules of track. We're going to talk about those. And then we got some select addenda. Yes, ma'am.
Where can I get the?
Materials are in the back.
Thank you. Is the sign sheet? Yes.
Let's go around.
This is Kasha. She signed up today.
Everybody in here has seniority over you.
That's good. You got it. Already be my guy.
Okay, so tell us your name again.
My name is Kasha Johnson.
Kasha, so look around. These are all the people you can ask the quick questions of. Ask all the quick questions.
Who do I ask?
All these people, all these people. Obviously, they know
They-
stuff. They know stuff. And you know what? If they don't have the right answer, they'll just make it up. We're seeing the same people who would say, Bob, is it okay if you do the contracts in pencil? So it's really easy to change later. Yeah. That helps us keep attorneys busy. Heaven knows we don't. So one of the things that we get to do, we get to talk about in these classes is in addition to material, the stuff that's set up and designed for the class, is that things happen. And when things happen, you guys in my other office, the Rockwall office. It gives us material things to talk about. And this addresses the option fee. Right behind you. There you go. And we understand the concept. The option fee goes to the title company now. And we understand in paragraph 5 of the contract, the time frame 3 days. Unless the third day is a weekend or legal holiday, then it goes to the next day. It's not a weekend or legal holiday. And you get to the third day by calendar dates. So if you had the effective date of the contract was a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it's going to go to Monday. Unless Monday's holiday, then it go to Tuesday. And one of the things that we really haven't totally been exposed to or thought through or whatever, back in the good old days, not necessarily good old days, but back in the old days, we delivered the option fee to the seller, actually to the listing agent, and the listing agent represented the seller. Do we have materials back here, Brad? We have materials? Yeah. Okay, good. And that was an important concept because the listing agent represents the seller. If we paid the option fee to the listing agent to the seller and they receipted it, if we paid to the seller, who generally may or may not have the ability to receipt it, but the seller took the money from the buyer, cashed the check, regardless of when the seller received it, the seller just ratified the option. So the buyer didn't deliver the option fee to the seller for 10 days, which is way beyond the required time frame, but the seller took the money. The seller just ratified the option. That concept is not true with the title company because the title company doesn't represent the seller. And when the title company receipts the option fee, they're simply acknowledging they've received it. They're not saying anything about it was on time, the buyer has an option period, none of that. They just took the money. So we just had a situation where the option fee was delivered way past the time required to the title company. And the buyer is now wanting to terminate. In this particular situation, we have the seller. And the buyer is wanting to terminate, even though he didn't deliver it on time. And in fact, his time frame for terminating is 1 day past the option period as stated in the contract. And so the reality is, buyer doesn't have an option period. We throw in the other factor that when you give money to the title company, if you only give them one check, they take whatever money they receive and first apply it to the option, and then the rest to the earnest. So in this case, the buyer technically had not even completed the earnest money requirement. So the seller has the ability to terminate the contract and move on and keep the earnest money. Now, in this particular transaction, our challenge is seller doesn't want to terminate. He wants to sell the deal. In fact, closing is supposed to be today when I finally got into it. So, and by the way, the rule is make the phone call to me sooner rather than later. I don't want to get a phone call. I say, we had talked about this 3 weeks ago. We could have done something. Today, the only thing we can do is tell our client, you know what, you need to talk to an attorney. You say what you're going to, because our seller in this case has come to the title company, has closed, has done everything, and the buyers now say, no, we're terminating. And it's a $1.2 million deal. And we're looking at $20,000 in earnest money and a $2,000 option fee. The buyer said, no, I said, no. So the challenge is understanding the difference between the rules and the option going to the title company and understanding that when the title company takes that money, they're not saying, buyer, yeah, we've got the money now, so you have an option period. James?
So in the contract, doesn't it say the seller may request the option fee, but could never actually request it until go to closing? So how do you as a buyer's agent?
Well, it deals with after the fact. If a transaction doesn't close, then the buyer in paragraph 5 gives the title company the ability to go ahead and give that money to the seller without any further permission from the buyer. That's kind of where you're going on that. I'm not sure.
Well, I was asking as a timing thing where was 1 day after the option period, but
Yeah.
it had never been paid.
The buyer has no right of termination.
But how can
Under
you
that.
ensure that the buyer, let's say if the buyer did it within a day after the 3 days required. But it still doesn't get paid to the seller.
Not yet.
Do we technically have an option?
Well, you do not. Here's the thing with the payment to the seller, and you have this in paragraph 5. Is the title company has the option fee,
Right,
and it says that the seller may request it.
right.
And if the seller requests it, then the title company has to give it up to seller. Now, frankly, that depends a little bit on the title company. Some title companies won't, some title companies will. They say, okay, we will, but we got to make sure this money clears the bank. So you got all kinds of extra challenges. But because the title company has received the option fee, and so we know when it got there, and we know it's past the 3 days. And so what that first means is that technically, if the seller wants to push the button, buyer has no termination option.
So even if they delivered it on day 1, the buyer doesn't have that right to terminate, that option is not. I mean, if they delivered it on day 1 and that seller hasn't received it, it's still at the.
Doesn't matter whether the seller's received it or not. If it's received by the title company,
Yeah.
that's the key. It's not received by the seller. Doesn't matter when the seller gets it or if they ever get it. The key is complying with the contract, which is delivery to the title company in those 3 days.
So that doesn't entitle the buyer to an option period if it's done within 3 days or.
Yeah, within the time frame. The key on the option period gets to proving up the timeline for delivery. And if you take it to the title company and the title company signs off on a receipt, you know the delivery was within the 3 days or not. And so that'll determine whether the buyer has the option or not. We had it back in the old days where the buyer would get it to the seller. You said? Okay. To the seller after the 3 days. And what we would advise our sellers is, you know what? You need to decide what you want to do. You can say to the buyer, you don't have a termination option because it's past the 3 days. Or you can say to the buyer, you know what? It's late. It's 5 days, not 3 days. But we'll go ahead and take the money. We're going to give you an option, not a problem. Now, that's a wise move because if the buyer had other termination rights in the contract, that's free money to the seller. Same thing now when it's delivered to the title company. It was delivered in a time frame there.
Somebody has a message.
Oh, okay. And I love their optimism that I'm technically competent to know that they're sending a message. I'm glad you're here to speak to me. So even delivered to the title company and deal with the receipt on the time frame, seller still has an option. You know, if it gets here 5 days or in 3 days, and the seller says, you know, yeah, and the seller finds out because title company said, you know, we finally received it, we got the option, you know, and so what do you want to do? You know, take it, not take it, whatever. All this, by the way, only means anything if the buyer chooses to terminate under the termination option. If they're not going to terminate under that, none of this matters. It doesn't count. It's only if the buyer said, well, yeah, we got a termination option, unrestricted right to terminate, and we're going to terminate. You know, maybe not. It's not automatic. But it's important to make that distinction between who receives that option, seller or the listing agent or the title company. If it's the listing agent or the seller back before, now because it goes to the title company, all the title company is doing is receiving it. And they're saying, here's when we received it. We're not confirming the buyer has an option period or not. We're not saying that, and they're not. Because we don't have what we had before, because title company doesn't represent the seller. That makes semi-sense? Yes, ma'am.
How about the seller? If the contract executed, but the title company have not received the earnest money and option day from the buyer, so how long the listing seller could termination?
Well, in the contract in paragraph 5, and what, for our Zoom people who may not have heard Jan's question, you were asking about the time frame for the title company in receiving the option fee and the earnest money.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
paragraph 5, it's 3 days.
yeah, but, oh, okay.
So it's 3 days for delivery of the option, 3 days to deliver the earnest money. unless it has that language, unless the third day is weekend or legal holiday, and it goes to the next day. So it's a 3-day time frame. Now, the key with the earnest money is if the buyer doesn't deliver the earnest money in that 3 days, the seller has a right to terminate. And so they get to terminate the contract as they work through that process. The seller doesn't have a right to terminate the contract because the buyer doesn't deliver the option fee. But they do have a right to terminate if they don't deliver the earnest money. As long as the seller does it prior to when the buyer actually ends up delivering.
But if a seller termination after 3 days, but the buyer should pay the option fee as well, right?
Because remember, the key is any money that goes to the title company first is applied to the option. Anything left over to the earnest money. That makes semi sense. Kinda. Well, here's the thing. Just like in the scenario that I just explained, where the agent who, we had seller in case and the buyers don't terminate, and here were the provisions. So particularly in that price range, the kind of money we're talking about, and today's day of closing, the only thing we say to the seller is they've done, when close, and then see an attorney. If the buyer's not going to close today, you need to talk to an attorney. You need to legal advice on what you're going to do. If you're going to go after the buyer, if you're going to go after the earnest money, you're going to go after the option, what are you going to do? It's just, and when you get to certain price ranges, and several of you in here are in those price ranges, everybody has an attorney. And when you're $1 million and above, everybody has an attorney. So when you tell them, says, you need to see some legal advice, then they know exactly where they're going to go because they already have attorneys that'll help them out. Work through the process. We good? Questions on that? Because it's endless. When things come up, because of the title company being the one that receipts this, yet not ratifying the option, it creates some gray areas that when the buyer decides to do something, can they do it? Do they really have a termination option? And probably not. But again, that's why we say to our seller, talk to a good attorney. As it turns out, in that particular transaction, the husband seller is a real estate attorney. I said, that's great. I love that. That is great.
Say it again. What'd you say?
The seller husband,
Okay.
who is our client, is a real estate attorney.
Ah,
So we love that. So you know what? Then give yourself some advice.
right.
Got to see what's going to happen here. We good? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Question.
About the option day extension. If the buyer wants to extension the option days,
You do that with the trick amendment form.
Mhm.
Right?
yes,
And the option fee for an extension of the option period is paid to the seller,
okay,
not the title company. And that's number 6 in the Utrecht promulgated amendment form. Which is not a part of the package. Huh?
but the
Oh, no.
extension fee, we should go negotiation with sellers,
The buyer and seller decide on how much an extension of the option period can be. And usually it's a small amount, $10, something like that. But it's paid directly to the seller, not to title company. And the title company said, we don't want these little checks for $1.10 and what, we don't want that. Ish?
The option fees after 3 days have expired, then that's when you can do the extension, correct?
Yeah, if you know that you're going to need to expire, then as you work through it, you've got that original 3 days to pay the option.
Right, so
You
when.
have to have paid the option fee within those 3 days to have the ability to extend the option period. The option period is probably for a longer time frame than the 3 days, although in today's market, sometimes it is 3 days.
So I'm a little confused. So the extension, you have to pay the option period before you can get an extension.
Yeah, because you need to actually have, and it's a great question, but here's the concept. It just brought up, and she's such a troublemaker. She does it all the time. Here's the concept. In order to extend an option period, you first have to have an option period. In order to have an option period, the buyer has to have paid an option fee for the original option period. So he's got and let's just get crazy, he's got a 10-day option period. Well, 5 days into it, we recognize that there's some plumbing problems or roofing problems, whatever. We need more time. And so we need to extend that 10-day option period for another 5 days. They go to the TREC promulgated amendment form, item number 6, I believe it is, and pay $10 or whatever to extend it for 5 days. They're extending an option period that exists. Until that option period is in existence, you cannot extend it. It has to actually be a real viable option period. And the way it becomes an option period is the buyer has paid an option fee within the 3 days. That makes semi-sense. Now, for something really clear, let's talk about TREC's advertising rules. This was a incredible evolution that we went through. For the advertising rule, and it's constantly a work in progress. You have a little handout at the first that says basic concepts of TREC advertising rules. And within TREC's advertising rules, they have this basic concept that one, their overriding concept is when you advertise, everyone who sees your advertisement needs to know who's responsible for you. So if they've got a problem with you, where do they go? Who's your broker? And so one of the first things that TREC did, so, you know, we've got to have in all advertising, in addition to the agent's information, we've got to have the broker's information. And we're going to see an exception to social media, but that's their first overriding rule. It says, we want the public to know who's responsible for you. And that's why they require your broker's information to be in all of your advertising. We'll talk about it in a minute. The other concept they have is you can't have anything in your advertising that's misleading about who's in charge of the brokerage. So you couldn't use one of the phrases they do not allow is, you know, you cannot use and associates. You know, so you couldn't say Brad Mattern and Associates. It says that causes the public to believe he's in charge of the brokerage. He might be, you know, at some level, actually more Jessica. He must have said, we all know. Yeah, we all know who's in charge. But you can't use that. You can't use company. You can't use president. You can't use founder. You can't use words that indicate that you have some like president, vice president, any of that. TREC says those all mislead the public and cause the public to think you're in charge of the brokerage at some level. So those are simply things that cannot be in your advertising as you work through it. The other thing that TREC did a change, and all these changes came out in 2018, not like they happened last month, May 15th of 2018. Now they did a revision for part of that in August of that same year, but essentially the basis for all this was in 2018. And it was leading up to it, it was almost a bloodbath between the realtors and TREC to come up with what we finally ended up with. Because there were some provisions and requirements that TREC was originally going for that as realtors we said, no, don't like that. For example, originally TREC said you cannot use in your advertising the word realty. Because the word realty causes people to think that it's your company, you've got the company. And you couldn't even use it in your DBA as a broker. And Texas Association of Realtors at the time did battle. And one of the things that TREC forgot about us, we know people. Some of the people we know are legislators. And one of our high-level realtors called high-level people at TREC, said, you don't want to go down this road because here's what will happen. There were no threats, but there was a reality of it'll cause you grief at levels that you don't even want to think about. So they thought through it a few minutes and said, yeah, you're probably right. And then they approved that the word realty could be in our advertising, provided it complied with the other advertising requirements. And this got into the situation of what name can you use? And the simple concept of is there are 3 names you can use in your advertising. One, you can always use the exact name on your license. So whatever name is, like I could advertise with Donald Robert Baker. That's what's on my broker's license. So whatever is on your license, you can use that. The other is you can use an alternative name. If, for example, and I was doing a class and there was a gentleman in the class and his name, I struggled with it. I mean, I couldn't pronounce it. It just had a lot of letters, a lot of consonants. And he was laughing. He just had so much fun watching me try to, he said, everybody calls me Fred. He goes by Fred. I said, well, I'd like to know that a couple minutes ago. So, and so he says, that's an alternate name. He has to register that with TREC so that when people pull him up under Fred, they know who that is. So that's a second. The third name you can use is a team name. And team is defined by TREC as one or more license holders. You don't actually have to have people on a team. TREC says, if you want to use a team name, as you do, John Sue Team, for example, that's okay. Because the key with a team name is it must end in the word team or group without exception. You can have realty in the team name, but the last word in the team name has to be team or group. Otherwise, it's not a team name. So the name on your license, an alternate name, or team name. Those are the three names you as license holder, you as agents can use in your advertising. Your alternate name, you use a form from TREC to register that with TREC. Of course, you don't need anything to use your name on your license because you already have that. Team names need to be registered with TREC. Now, and I need for, so Zoom folks, can you hear me okay? Because I'm about to go into something that's a big change, something we haven't been doing and we're going to have to make sure we do now. Give me a thumbs up, Zoomers. Is there anybody there who is actually live? I've got a lot of people's pictures here.
Yes.
Okay, good. So when you do a team name, it gets registered by the broker with TREC. What you do is you send to us, here's the team name I want to use. What's your team name, Brad?
Pattern Team.
Pattern Team was registered by us with TREC. Now, we got some clarification from TREC, and I had talked to a number of my broker colleagues with other companies, and I found out that we weren't the only ones. We didn't tell our agents who have a team name, whether it's individual or a team with, multiple people, that what you've got to do is register that team name with the county. The TREC says, we need to know you have the authority to use that name. Now, it's a simple process. You can do it online. You can't do it today because Collin County or this type of function is down until Wednesday. They're going through some revision of their stuff or whatever, doing some on the website. But it's easy. I think it's like $50 for 10 years. But if you're using a team name, you need to register with the county in which you do business. So you now need to do that. You always should have done it. We just never pushed it. We never said, yeah, you got to do this, which you do. So whatever your team name is, register with the county. Work through that process. And that's something that you now need to do that we never really pushed or talked about before. You should work through. So those are the overriding concepts that TREC has for why they have their rules. And you have two sets of documents. One is a 3-page, the other is a 2-page that are right from the TREC website. One of them, it says at the top, Texas Registry. And it, this is 535.154, 2 pages. And the next is 535.155. Now, 154 primarily has definitions. It defines what an advertisement is. It talks about that in 155 also. And the TREC has the broadest possible definition of advertisement. Everybody see those two things at the top? It says Texas Register. And one of it talks about it is 154. 535 and 154. The next one says 535 and 1505. Rick says if you're doing anything, and the reason you're doing it is to encourage someone to do business with you, it's advertising. We don't care if it's a billboard, on radio, on the TV, on a card, on a little novelty. We don't care what it's for. If you're doing it because you want somebody to know that you're in real estate, encourage them to do business with you, it's advertising. So when you do something, you say, well, that's really not advertising. I'm just letting people know. I said, no, why'd you do it? Well, that's like, no, you did it because you want business. Because if that's why you did it, and we call it advertising, and here are the rules. Here are the things that you've got to deal with. So we talk about it. Now, we also talk about associated broker. Does everybody see this two-page thing? Top is the Texas Register. Okay. And it talks about under 2, 3, and 4, it talks about alternate name, associated broker, assumed business name, and team name. Alternate, we just talked about, if you've got a name other than the name that you have on your license that you want to use working through it, that's an alternate name, and you personally use the TREC form and register that with TREC. The other is associate broker. A number of our agents in our office have a broker's license. Our policy is you're not allowed to sponsor anyone under your broker's license. Marvin Jolly, for example, has a broker's license. He can't sponsor anyone under that license. He's what we call a broker associate. You can use the phrase broker associate, associated broker. You cannot just use the phrase broker. The TREC says that'll lead the people to believe that you're the broker for the firm. You can't do that. So you can use in your advertising broker associate, associated broker. It talks about that under associated broker and what you can do if you work through that. A broker associate is someone who has a broker's license and has a relationship, an ongoing relationship with the broker for the firm. And it's generally established they're either an employee, for example, I'm a broker, I'm a managing broker for the firm. In fact, Brody is the designated broker, the broker of record. So I'm a broker, managing broker. I'm an employee. Someone else who has a broker's license, Martin Jolly, for example, is an independent contractor. So you can be an employee of the broker, of the brokerage, you can be an independent contractor. Any of those, if you have a broker's license, you can advertise as a broker associate, associated broker. So you can do those. So that's how you can make use of the fact that you have a broker's license.
What's the difference between a contractor and the associate broker?
Okay, independent contractor, everybody working with us is an independent contractor. They've signed off on an independent contractor agreement, like you signed off on that. And it says, here are the rules that you have to follow and so forth. Now, you can be an independent contractor, as Marvin Jolly is, and also have a broker's license. A broker is not sponsored by another broker. So if you look at Marvin Jolly's license, the only name he has on it is his. If I look at a salesperson license by Ian Sue, I see her name on it, and I see Texas Tarpath Partners, who's the name of the brokerage. Your name and the name of the brokerage on your license as you work through that. So that's an independent contractor would be that. Someone with a broker's license could also be an independent contractor relationship by signing off on the same title agreement that you signed on.
How about the supervisor?
Okay, supervisor is a role. It has nothing to do with whether you're a broker or not a broker. You can be a salesperson and be a supervisor. You can be a broker associate and be a supervisor. TREC creates a situation where there's a requirement that if you in fact supervise someone for activities that require a license for at least 3 months or intended for 3 months, then TREC says you're a supervisor, and that has to be designated on the TREC website on your name. So when you look at someone's name who's a supervisor, look under their name, it'll say supervisor, yes or no, and you have to check it off. That's a simple thing that you check off as you work through it. We went through a case, and Larry, you'll be happy to hear this, I guess. I don't remember. We went through a period where we thought even husband and wife teams, if that was a whole team as a husband and wife, as a team. And so we had to designate somebody in charge of that.
Really no question.
That was an easy one for y'all.
Really no question.
Well, what we've since discovered is we don't have to do that. We can have husband and wife team, and they're operating on an equal level. Neither one of them supervises the other. We don't automatically have to take someone and say you're a supervisor.
You don't have a chance.
Now,
Don't have a
when
chance.
you have a larger team, you've got to decide who the lead agent is, who the supervisor is on that team. And that person will have to be designated on the Trek website as supervisor, which means they have to take the broker responsibility course. So whoever in your office, and then the team gets to decide who that is. Could be the lead agent for the team, like Lance Taylor in his situation, could be you, could be Jessica, whoever. It comes down to that person.
Did they really get to decide? Because I was told that I was a supervisor.
Yeah, because they wanted you to take the course. They want you to know stuff, right? So that was a little bit of a break because one, we had a challenge with teams that were, the whole team was just husband and wife. And then they would laugh about it. For example, Sally Meisner and Don, and I said, well,
Arts.
and Bart's, Prazadas, who've since retired. So we say, we don't have to. We had some teams that the whole team was two people, like Marjorie and Nick Klein. We don't have to say one of you supervising the other. I said, no, we're operating on exactly the same level. Well, we don't have to make one of you a supervisor. So we've got more flexibility in this than we thought we originally had. That's kind of good. You should work through it. You see on this 154, you see associated broker, assumed business name. This was a change. The assumed business name, which is also called a DBA, doing business as. Back 4 years ago, Trek used one form for DBAs, for both the broker and for agents. Agents could actually have a DBA, but no longer. Trek says the only one who can have a DBA is the broker. Agents either have associated broker, team name, alternate name. Agents with Trek cannot have a DBA. Now, you may register your team name with the county as an alias, an assumed name. With Trek, the only people with Trek who have a DBA is the broker. So the broker registers with Trek as that DBA with Trek. Team names, as I mentioned earlier, are registered by the broker. You give us, here's your team name. You say, and by the way, I have registered with the county. So here's my team name I'm going to use in the business. And by the way, you can use multiple team names. Doesn't have to be just one. Trek doesn't create any restrictions on how many team names that you have. You have towards the end of this, before you get to the forms, you've got this right here, which shows Texas StarPath Partners. And down here, this is a partial list of our team names. And also right above it has a list of our 7 DBAs. These are the 7 DBAs that we registered with the state, Trek. And down beneath it, you see team names. Now, this is not all of them, this is about half of them. These are all agents in our office who have sent a team name in and we registered with Trek. I have to go through this and remove some of these because, once someone is no longer with us, we have the team name here, we need to change it. Like the Camacho home group, our Camacho is not with us anymore, so I've got to delete that. But these are all agents of ours, have a team name, and there's another list about the same size on the next page. Now, the DBAs that you see here, right under where it says DBAs, these are all DBAs that when you're advertising, you have your information, you have the broker's information. You don't have to put the broker's name, you can use the broker's DBA. You don't have to say, take StarPath Partners Limited. You can say, for example, one of our DBAs is KW Plano.
Is that KW Plano?
Notice, do you have it?
I'm looking.
Okay, so,
But
yeah.
do we use KW Plano or is it Keller Williams?
What do you want to use? You can use any of these
Any of the ones.
except for one, when you use with Luxury International, you have to qualify for it. But all the rest of them, you can advertise just Keller Williams Realty, Keller Williams Realty Plano, Keller Williams Realty Paris, if you're one of our Paris agents, KW Advisors, or KW Plano. All of these are DBAs registered with TREC. So you can make the choice in your advertising which one you want to use. Sometimes agents say, I don't want to limit myself by saying Plano. I'm just going to say, Keller Williams Realty.
Right.
You can do that because that's one of our DBAs. Registered with TREC. So you can use any of these as you work through it. So in your advertising, you've got to have your information and your broker's information. Question on that? We good?
No, it's exactly as it's written, Keller Williams Realty Plano, not comma Plano.
Correct.
Correct.
How about the KW?
KW Plano, but not KW. See, one of our DBAs is not KW. The logo is not registered. You can't just use a logo, and you can't just use KW. KW is not one of our registered DBAs. You can only use one or more of these DBAs you see right here. So when you go to the TREC website and put our information in, put our license number in, 492040, pull this up. Right there, it tells you all the DBAs we have. And that, by the way, that's changed over time. We started with about 3 of them and we continue to expand it. But these are the only ones you can use when you're identifying the broker.
How about the logo? Logo just.
The logo is not sufficient. TREC does not recognize logos.
Okay.
Yeah. James?
Does the state have a list of all the team names to avoid duplication or?
Well, it's a tricky situation. When you register with the county, they will go through a search situation for to see about distinguishing. However, the county is very careful to tell you there's no protection here. We don't protect you from liability. We don't protect you from lawsuits. Having a team name is not going to create that corporate shield that many people want. Even when you set up an LLC, they're not saying that that's the case. So when you register, you may get something back and say, hey, now one of the odd things with TREC, you see one of our DBAs, Keller Williams. 10 other KW offices in our area have that exact same DBA with TREC. And at the time that when Avis Wukosh was the chair of the Texas Real Estate Commission, and she's a broker down around Rock Georgetown, I asked her, I says, how does TREC distinguish? How do we know which one? She said, we don't. And right, we don't care. We're kind of going to rely on other information to tell you which Keller Williams it is. And she says, by the way, Bob, we use Keller Williams. So the reality is, there's nothing in here that TREC is going to say, well, wait a minute, we got another Keller Williams Plano. How many Keller Williams Plano people are you there? So it doesn't matter. They don't care. They're not going to do something and make sure, hey, there are other people with this same DBA, you can't use it. TREC doesn't do.
Is the county that you register in the county that the broker?
Well, what you register in, theoretically, technically, the county that your office is in and other counties in which you do business. You may also do business in Denton County. You may do business up in Grayson County, Tarrant County, Dallas County. They say, I do a lot of stuff down in Preston Hollow. You may want to register with the Dallas County too.
So you have to pay those fees every year.
Yeah, $50, I think, for 10 years. So it's pretty minimal. And I think they've got a fee for a search, and you do it online. Collin County, for example, I don't know if it's true with all the counties, won't do any of the searching like that by phone. You can do it online, or you do it in person. Go to the county clerk's office up in McKinney and work through that. But you need to register somehow. So on this 535.154, where you see all this information, and is everybody comfortable, that may be too strong a word, but comfortable with the concept of the team name? You don't have to have a team. It can be just you. And if it's just you, like Holly's case, you can have a team name. What's your team name?
Team Fury.
It's Team Perry.
It's my registered
Well,
domain name and everything.
It's not Team Perry. It may be
Voices in my head.
what's the last word in your team name? It may be Perry. No. The last word of your team name has to be team or group. You say Perry team, Perry group,
Well, it's
team Perry group,
Team Perry Group.
Team Perry.
but the last word of your team name has to be team or group. No exceptions.
Yes.
I don't care how many other things you say. You say, team matter and team group, team, and then group. The last word has to be team or group. So the concept is, if you're not using the exact name on your license or an alternate name that you're ready to track, it's gonna be a team name. That team name has to have at the end of it, team group, yes.
About the team and the group, is that about the member, how many member in your team?
No, it has nothing to do with,
Whatever.
has nothing to do with that. Has nothing to do with how many members in the team. Doesn't have, you may have nobody on the team. It's
So,
just
so
be you.
no different about the team or group.
Do what?
So no, that's no different about the team.
Yeah, team or group doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, if you say group, well, if it's group, then I gotta have a lot of people. No, team, well, I gotta have a team, no. Those are just phrases that Trek uses.
I would say for purposes of this office, though, we distinguish between team and group when we're giving out awards, but that's a.
That's a different thing.
That's a whole different
Yeah.
thing. That's just in our
Yeah,
office.
the KWR award situation with teams and
That's
groups
not
like that,
legal.
different concept than what Trek uses. All this is Trek. We good?
How about for
Yes.
alternate name? Like,
Okay, alternate name is when you're using a name that's not a team name and that's not the name on your license. There's a form from Trek that you send in to Trek and you register it. Of course, you'll copy us, so we'll know what your alternate name is.
okay, is there a fee for that?
Yeah, well, no, not to Trek. Trek doesn't charge anything for that.
So do you keep a list of all the team names in our office?
Yeah. Although I will tell you that there's some team names, I look on here and I go, I don't remember who that is. I remember who True Names Group is, and he's not with us anymore. So I've got to remove that. So we got some there.
Identity, yep.
Um,
Girls.
I had a couple that went in and when we weren't as diligent about our organization or whatever, and I go, who's the good to be home group?
That's
Denise Hunt.
You know what, you're right. I remember that now.
So Bob, do you require uniqueness? Unlike Keller Williams, as a DBA for Trek, within your office, have you ever ran into people trying to use the same?
Okay, so I get, is the question kind of that if somebody wants to use such and such as team name, do we check to make sure there's not someone else in the office? Yeah, we would not want two agents with using the same team name.
Thanks.
Yeah. So we take a look at it and say, and it's not like we don't have 200 or 300 team names. We've got a pretty good amount. When you look at the KW Preston Road, got a huge list of team names, like double what we have. Well, they keep track of it. They may not. It's okay. Yeah, so let's go to the second one here that 535.155, and it defines advertising. It talks about what broker's name means. It defines contact information because when you put the broker's information on the advertising, you put your information and the broker's information. The broker's information needs to be readily apparent, which needs to be at least half the size of the largest contact information. So here on this first page, 535.155, it tells you what contact information is and explains what that is. And then it talks again about advertising, about team name. Now, under paragraph C, and then to the top of the next page, 1 and 2, it talks about the exception we have because in all the advertising, you've got to have your information and the broker's information, which can be the DBA. But you have special situations. When Trek first set this up, I didn't realize there are special circumstances with social media. And some things that the size just, that you don't have room to put all that there. So I said, okay, if it's social media, if you're not going to put that information on the main page, you've got to be able to link it. And you got to have it, where it's accessible. And on the link, it has the information for the broker, the information that you're required to have. Now, we've had this conversation, but Angie and I just had the conversation, Jill, this morning. It's what system is on Facebook, evidently. And there's an aspect of Facebook that I didn't realize, and to me, it doesn't make sense. But when you do the link and give the information over on your account information, it does not give you the ability to put the broker's information, to put another company's information. You only put yours in there. Facebook evidently takes a position, it's your business and you are the total, that we can't let you also throw somebody else in. So what we've done is you link to your website, and on your website, you have the broker information. And we're going to treat that as in compliance until we hear different from Trek. So you'll be in compliant if you, in social media, you have that link that takes you to the other information. And then that link, that gives you a link where you can tag or whatever and go to your website. And on your website, you have to have that broker information. Just like you've also got to have in there your information about broker services form and consumer protection notice. So we're taking a position that that's in compliance. Because when we look at all our major teams, we're going to say, yeah, that's exactly what they do. And we're going to treat that as the right thing and how it works. Now, on the second and third page of this extra thing, 535.55, it's got 20 little doodle pops that says all these can show that you're in fact not in compliance. Do any of these things, if you identify a sales agent as a broker, yeah, and I talk about things like owner, president, CEO, can't use any of that information. There is an interesting one that I think we don't really give a lot of thought to. Sometimes you'll have husband and wife on your profile or on your picture in your advertising, but only one of them is licensed. Well, you've got to identify the other person is not licensed. Because the public look at that and say, oh, well, both of them are licensed holders, both of them are agents. And we're in fact only one of them may be. So you can't lead the public to believe that, Joe and Nancy are both, in fact, Nancy's the only one who's licensed. So you can't use both of those unless you identify the other. And that's sort of requirements you've got here under number 8. But I would encourage you to keep this as a reference, look through it, and make sure you have some sense of following the key rules that Rick says, hey, here are our big concerns. You do this and you're going to stay out of trouble. Questions on that? Yes, ma'am.
On Realtor and agent, when do you use Realtor versus agent? Because agent, apparently anybody can be an agent or that's
Be licensed.
licensed.
That'd be a license holder.
So Realtor is all caps. How does that all
Well,
work?
it's not all caps, it's the first capitalized first letter. First
Because I've
letter.
always seen it all caps with the
Yeah,
register.
Realtor is not, NAR changed that rule about 10 years ago.
Oh.
So it used to be all cap, but it's no longer required all cap, just the first letter.
Okay. So
Um,
Realtor equals agent?
No,
Okay. What's the
well,
difference?
yeah. Realtor, all realtors are also agents, unless they're an affiliate. All agents are not realtors.
Okay.
We've got over 20,000 license holders in Texas who are not realtors, have an active license. So you can work through that. There's an interesting thing that Trek gives us a little bit of break on that. Trek doesn't regulate your URLs and your signature, but you don't have to follow the same advertising rules as you go through that. But you can use the word realtor, if that applies to you if you are in fact a realtor.
Do you use the little register thing?
Yeah, the trademark R, which I don't, My word's not set up for that, so I don't know if you've got that technique where you do that or not. So,
I thought that in Texas, we all have to be realtors.
no. We really do have over 20,000 people with an active real estate license who are not realtors. No state requires everyone who's licensed to be a realtor. When you look at, for example, the North Texas Commercial Association of Realtors, NetCar, it's about half and half. And it had to be approved by an AR. About half of those realtors say, we don't need to be realtors because we don't need your MLS. We got CoStar and all our other stuff. So about half of their people are brokers who have a license but are not realtors.
So they don't have access to MLS?
No.
Another question I have is, let's say, I was licensed in, let's say, Seattle, right? Would I have to become a realtor there? Or is it because I'm a realtor here, I'm a realtor?
Yeah, if you're a realtor anywhere in the country, yeah, your license doesn't transfer. Your license in Seattle doesn't transfer to here. Realtor is an NAR status, and it goes throughout the entire country. You're a realtor everywhere, but not necessarily licensed.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, because Texas does not have reciprocal with anyone.
So what do we use as our title? If someone says, what is your title? Is it
What do you want your
sales
title to be?
agent? What's,
It doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter.
Personal choice.
Sales agent, you can be,
Yeah, you can
Under
be an
the
agent,
broker.
you can be a realtor. Can't be a broker unless you are a broker.
right. But
You're a
sales
broker
agent,
associate.
realtor, what else?
Estate agent.
Yeah, you need to, in none of your advertising can you use phrases like company and CEO and things like that. Even if you are, you can use that. The one who can use that is the broker for the firm as you work through that. I think that titles are not as effective. Janet, you want to chime in on this at some level as a description of who you are and what you do. I think most people have a different idea about what a title is. So you need to be a little careful about using titles as it were.
You'll notice, you'll see Realtor all in caps. That means they are a nationally certified Realtor. They're under the NAR.
Right.
So you can only use this in all caps if you are a member of NAR. Writing Realtor and lower caps, except for the first one, is not the same as this.
Oh, I
You
didn't know
can't
that.
use lower cap realtor. That's a violation of copyright law, trademark law.
Right.
You don't have to have all the letters capitalized. If the first letter is capitalized, that meets any art requirements.
Well, my understanding was people will recognize the all caps.
Probably will,
In the
but you
field.
need to understand NAR does not require all caps.
Can you
The
turn
first-
around and look at these two things I wrote down?
Okay,
So you're saying this
That's
is
okay.
okay?
with NAR, yes. Absolutely.
I always use this one.
That's a good one to use, sure.
Because people recognize that
Yeah,
as
oh, and I think so.
second
Because that
designation.
all cap is an emphasis.
Yeah,
Yeah. Not legally required by NAR, but I think it's a good idea.
well, then I stand corrected. See, you learn something every day.
When doing business as and all the registers that this broker has here, they're all in caps on this sheet. Does that mean we need to put them all in caps?
No, this is how it came out.
Because I didn't think so, but I need to ask because they're all in caps here.
It's just easier reading
Yeah, it is easier reading.
on
You're right.
those forms.
Jenna, I'm also saying licensed realtor. How would you put that one?
Okay,
Texas
now,
State licensed Realtor.
no such thing as a licensed realtor.
Oh, okay.
There's no such thing as a realtor license.
It's the same thing.
Now, I think the public probably, when you say licensed realtor, think, oh, my guy's, yeah, it's got a real estate license. That's probably the perception. And I don't think it's a bad perception. But you need to understand, there is no such thing as a realtor license anywhere in the country.
It's a membership.
Yeah. Realtor is a membership of the NAR, Texas Realtor, CCAR. But the reality is.
Yet they give us a license number.
Trek does,
Trek does, yes.
Trek does.
So that's Texas.
Yeah.
So
Well,
Trek
each state
gives us a
has
number.
their own licensing requirement. Sure.
That's where it gets confusing. We have a license number by Trek.
Yeah.
But we're not licensed real estate agents.
Yeah, we are from Trek, but we're not licensed
We're not
realtor.
licensed realtor. Realtor's like a fraternity.
No, it's a real estate agent.
It's a trade name.
It is, it's a trade name.
It's a trade name.
Yeah.
It's a membership based
It's a
on.
copyrighted registered trade name. And NAR spends significant money every year protecting that copyright.
Yeah, there was just a story the other day about somebody using hashtag realtor in their like Facebook posts and stuff. And once, if they find it, they'll come and they'll sue you. Even if you're an individual agent, you can't use, Texas Realtor, you can't use DFW Realtor and all that kind of stuff without having permission from Trek to use Realtor as one of your hashtags. What? Good thing.
Not Trek, but NAR.
I mean, NAR, sorry, NAR, without permission. They can come after you on your posts and stuff when you're hashtagging, because they're the only ones that have the right to use Realtor as a hashtag, NAR.
What? Where's that? I
Where
didn't
is
know
it?
that.
Well, I'm telling you now, so they can, NAR can come after you if you're using it as like,
There's a whole, almost a book, a booklet from NAR on use of the term realtor. And what you can and cannot do, how you can use it, how you work through the process. Because they don't want to fall into the role of Kleenex, for example, where it got to be just generic.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what a Kleenex is. You lost the brand
Kleenex,
name.
Xerox,
Huh?
the Kleenex, Xerox, Saran Wrap, Coke, Q-tip. Things like.
And then another question about our, that's a number, it's always put a zero, so
Okay,
let's
so
say-
your license number, when you go onto the Trek website,
Uh-huh.
you don't use the zero.
Yeah,
But when you're doing it with, for example, Netris, you include the whole thing.
okay, so put the zero.
Put the zero in it, only do the Netris,
How about
but not with Trek.
IADS in that?
Yeah, use the whole number. But it won't matter, because when someone wants to research who you are, if they put your number in without the zero, Trek will recognize it. But that, if you put your license number in with the zero, Trek won't pull it up. You won't show up in Trek if you have the zero at the beginning. Except for my license number, which is 01, so.
Yeah.
Just kidding. It is actually a 01 to
It is.
262, so the whole license, so. Does that make semi-sense?
You have a good point every now and then.
It happens occasionally. What really is, it's a little bit like when you're doing multiple offers and you write a great offer for your buyer. How you have to take the time to explain to the listing agent, here's why it's such a great offer. Here's what makes this a really, really good offer. As you work through it. There's some things that, we get into such a habit on. I was talking to actually two different title companies. We were talking about how we default to the title company for certain things. And the title companies, to provide good customer service, just do certain things. Like they order up the survey. It's not their job. Not their responsibility, yet we default to it. HOA docs, most HOA management companies don't hear from anybody except for the title. But the contract and the law allows the buyer and the seller both for FHOA docs. But title companies are saying, yeah, provide good service, we're just going to go ahead and do certain things. And they do. As you work through it, they'll help you through with dealing with situations like going through and properly making sure the HOA fees are correctly done. In addition to what's in the contract itself.
So just real quick, just to clarify, I know it's kind of going backwards, but so if I were to use an email, I can't put in my email realty at all.
No, you can't. Yeah, Trek in an email allows you to do that. I mean, if you're talking about your email signature,
Yeah, because when I'm going through my paperwork, it asks for professional email I want to provide the public.
Yeah.
So I don't know, do I use Keller Williams or the one I've always used that's attached to me?
Yeah.
But the one I use is Realty Ed, such and such.
Yeah. In your email, that's okay. Now, not in your advertising. When you're advertising and you're saying, here's who I am, remember, team name, team or group at the end. Within the team name, you can use the word realty. But at the end, it has to be team or group.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, let's look at some of these select addenda. Texas Realtors, if you get their emails, just recently did a good little article on changing the financing. So this first one, we talked about third-party financing addendum. We continue to have this happen. And you need to understand how it works so that you can really take care of your client working through the situation. We have heard the Broker Laurie Committee is working on changing what's in paragraph 3 of the contract where we have financing there and information on third-party financing to be specific on the financing and prohibit the buyer from changing the financing without seller's permission. That's kind of just a work in progress. We don't know what's going to finally look like. But they've gotten enough feedback from us, people in business say, a seller took a cash offer and turned out it wasn't cash. And it's going to go FHA or VA or mixed or whatever. Or it started out conventional, they changed FHA. So there's a process that we deal with here because the buyer and seller originally entered into a contract with certain terms. If they started off with a cash contract, then the third-party finance addendum is not included. It's not an addendum in the contract. I have it checked off of paragraph 22, which this is the first addendum in that paragraph where we list all the addenda and exhibits. So if the buyer after the fact, if they get their cash offer accepted, and did I notice that Homeward was here earlier? And they talk about a buyer being able to do a cash deal, that's what I recall. And the feedback I've gotten so far is that's a pretty good deal. We got several agents here, Lindsay and people like that who are making use of it. So there are situations where your buyer can, if he qualifies otherwise for all these other parts of it, can do a cash deal or cash offer. But when a buyer makes a cash offer, and then after it's a contract, it's such a, oh yeah, I love cash, and just roll the offer back in. After the fact start changing it, then the seller may think that the buyer's pulling a fast one. They all along, they lied to me and intended to shift to a financing just want to get into a contract. May be the case, may not be the case. It may be that after the fact, the buyer discovered some situations that said, hey, yeah, it makes more sense for me to take out $800,000 and rather than, give that to the seller, cash deal, if the interest rates that are so low, and they still are, and they really still are low. What are they now? Okay. What if they were 6? That's still so, that's what they were in 1966 when I first got into the business. And we thought, wow, we'll never see rates this low again. Of course, we have. What's crazy is when we look at a rate pop, go up a quarter, go up a half, and you look at a buyer who's going to pay 20 or 30,000 more than list price or appraised value, and they're going to be in the house for 3 or 4 years, and they're worried about an extra $30 because of the interest rate. It's dumb. Well, we can't buy a house for what? It's crazy. You need to have the script to help them deal with.
It's over a 30-year.
Yeah, and they may not be there for 30 years.
Yeah.
Even if they are, it's not, when you look at it, well, how much does it cost for an extra quarter point, extra half point? You need to know that number. You need to know here's what it's going to cost you so that you don't lose out on a really great price. Because we are seeing the shift right now. We're seeing properties that, 3 weeks ago, put it on the market, 20 offers. On the market now, 5 offers. We're seeing the shift. We're seeing, buyers who are just flat giving up, coming back. So, we'll continue to see that, even though we're moving into hot and heavy season. So in deal with the financing, if you have a seller, you understand whether it makes sense or not to work with the buyer. And the two ways you can do this. You start off, first of all, you start off with a cash transaction. And the buyer says, turns out I do want to do financing and I want to do conventional financing. And so I want us to amend the contract, to add the third-party financing addendum. Now, so I says, well, but that creates some contingencies that I don't think I'm willing to give you. Say, well, okay, here's how we deal with this. Here's what we know happens at closing. It's all cash to the seller at closing.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where it came from, it's all cash to the seller at closing. So I says, okay, here's what I'll do. Buyer, you close first, you get everything done. And then all I have to do as the seller is sign this amendment and I get my money. It's going to happen at closing. I'm not going to do it 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time. If we all these contingencies for you, it all happens at closing. If the seller says, yeah, okay, I'll go along with that, and still otherwise a good offer, then he's getting this done at closing. So he doesn't have to worry about giving up for it. Now, the seller may be okay, say, yeah, okay, let's go ahead and do it. Let's do the financial dinner. Now, the challenge you sometimes will have, you have the buyer, is what the buyer's lender requires. Sometimes, particularly on an FHA, we have the mandatory clause that has to be presented. They may say, before we can finally be able to do a clear close and do all the CD and everything in closing, we need for this to be signed off beforehand. If that's what the buyer lender requires, and so they say, well, I don't know, am I willing to do that or not? Am I willing to go ahead and amend it and add the third-party finance to them and give the buyer these contingencies? I don't know if I'm willing to do that or not. Seller doesn't have to. Particularly if the seller's sitting there with a backup contract better than this one anyway. I said, you know what? I understand, buyer, you have no control over this. It's your lender. For you to change and get another lender doesn't require this because I'm not signing it. You cannot require either party to agree to amend the contract. There's no ability to make that legal requirement. Can't do it. So I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And if you can't close under the terms of this contract that you and I are in, you're in default, and I'm going to keep that $30,000 in earnest money. Or if not, we're going to both go to court and battle over. So the seller can make a decision how he wants to go through that. If you've got the buyer, and there's a legitimate good reason why your buyer needs to shift. And we see that, from conventional to FHA because of some credit requirements or some situations that just say, I really need this different financing. Then the buyer's agent needs to make a good case with the listing and says, okay, it's a great offer otherwise. Here's what's happened. Here's what the buyer would like to request. And we'd like to the seller to go ahead and agree to amend the contract and add the third-party financing addendum. And let's move forward and close under these terms. Now, if this contract is such that the buyer is the first warm body to show up in 6 months, so yeah, I just hope we close. Yeah, what do we need to do to get it done? But if the seller sitting there with a better backup and he doesn't care about this buyer, he said, no, you can close under this or don't close. Now, the other thing you've got to look at is a timeline. If you've got a closing coming up and it's a 45-day closing, buyer says, well, okay, I'm genuinely going to do this, but I'm not in default until I don't close, and that's 45 days later. So the seller's going to have his house off the market that whole time before you do anything.
What do you mean a 4 or 5 day closing?
45 day.
Oh, okay.
45 day.
Sorry.
Yeah. So you may say, I don't know that I want to leave it off the market that long. So let's see what we can work out. And you may ask for additional earnest money or something in the transaction. Yes, ma'am.
About this, how about number 2, approval of financing? If my buyer signed the addendum of termination due to lender appraisal result, but in paragraph 2A, what day I put 10 days?
Okay, so the question becomes, Sue, is under buyer approval and 2A, the third-party financing addendum is blank for a number of days. You get that from the buyer's lender.
Okay, but if my buyer signed the termination appraisal for the fully fully waives.
Okay, now,
So that's
the
based on
appraisal
like-
waiver
Uh-huh,
does not relate to 2A.
okay.
That relates to property approval, which is 2B. And all that deals with, all the waiver, the appraisal waiver is, all that deals with is the appraisal, which is a property approval, not a buyer approval.
Okay, so that's if not approved, by, is if about the 2A at the later day or before the days, in the end, the vendor not approval, I still could terminate, even I
Yeah, so we have in paragraph 2, A and B, we've got a buyer approval, which has nothing to do with the property, just the buyer. And you see on the second page of the third party finance addendum, defines what that is. That's only the buyer. So within that number of days, and that number of days, you got that where? Where'd you get it? Buyer's lender. So within, say, 15 days. So within that 15 days, if the buyer's lender says, no, we don't approve you, bad ratios, whatever. Plus you just found out you just lost your job and that what. Buyer says, okay, well then I'm terminating. So the buyer has a right to terminate within that number of days. It doesn't do with appraisal, it just has to do with the fact that buyer's financing doesn't work based on what it means by financing. Compensating appraisal. Buyer has satisfied all the lender's requirements related to buyer's assets, income, and credit history. That's all that deals with. Now, 2B is property approval, which deals with the appraisal, but all the other lenders' underwriting requirement. So in the addendum dealing with the appraisal waiver, all that addresses is the appraisal. So if there are other underwriting requirements, lender required repairs, title issues, other things that the lender says, you know, our underwriter doesn't approve this property for these reasons, had nothing to do with the appraisal. That timeline goes all the way, or conventional, to 3 days prior to closing. FHA VA goes all the way to closing. So those are two entirely different approvals. And the appraisal addendum only relates to property approval.
Okay.
If I give it that distinction, it works for those two.
So if, I have to confirm that if the lender told me the buyer for A, lender not approved.
For 2A, for 2A,
2A, so lender gonna termination that.
lender. So in 2A, the buyer finds out from their lender, we do not approve you, the buyer, based on assets, income, and credit history.
Yeah,
And it's within this number of days. Then the buyer has to make a decision whether to terminate based on that.
okay,
And that's one of the things on the TREC promulgated notice of termination form. That's one of the reasons that a buyer can check a box off and terminate.
okay, so if in that case, the earnest money could go back to my buyer.
Should, but that's going to be the decision of the title company.
Would you need a letter from the lender?
Well, you know, that's presumed to be the case, but under buyer approval, you don't need anything. Now, the seller is going to yell and scream, say, you know what? The reason we took your offer is you said you got a solid gold buyer. I mean, they've been approved for the Borrowers Hall of Fame. That's why we took your buyer. And now you're telling us they can't get approval? Were you just lying to us? What's going on there? So we need something from the lender. Well, nothing in paragraph 2A requires that. Although they're going to fuss, and what the leverage is, they're going to say, you know what, if we don't have something, you're not getting the earnest money back. We're going to go to battle. And that's the only rule with it.
So the pre-approval letter,
See, for approval letter, it's not part of the contract, doesn't mean anything.
It's not a conditional approval, right?
So it doesn't matter what this, because remember, there's no lender anywhere in the contract. And in fact, the buyer could change lenders. So the lender the buyer started off with, he said, man, solid gold, solid gold, solid gold. And then the idiot buyer, who's a moron, you know what? Here's a lender over here that'll give me a 1/16% better rate. And I'll save $3.12 a month. I gotta go with them. Here's your sign. Yeah.
Clearly that happens sometimes.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I mean, buyer, don't let your buyer start rate hopping. Don't let them do it, because that's not the most important part of
What
it.
would you say to that?
You know what? You're an idiot. No. Let's look at all the costs and let's look at the most important thing. Which one is going to give you the best service? Which one is going to bring you to the lenders underwriting requirements and who's going to finally get this thing closed?
Right.
Because those lenders who are just playing the rate hopping game are not the ones that give you the best service and have a great record for closing. There's so much more involved in that. Okay, question?
I have a scenario is the mortgage, the lender gonna delay to the closing. But the listing agent, the seller not agree, the delay the closing time. The lender told me they could give a form, I don't know that, but she said they could give the form to lock this house, not gonna to resell again. Is that true?
No.
No, I think.
So she's got a situation, the buyer's lender is saying, if they don't work with us, let us extend, we've got a form that can tie this property up. You know, when you hear something like that, you know what? I don't want to sound like a legal issue. We're gonna have our client talk to our attorney. We don't think he can do that, but it's a legal issue. And by the way, that lender needs to go on your little backlist, not to ever work with a buyer who's using them again because they're idiots. So you got to work through that. Thank you, sir. Now, you're gonna miss the best part because you got Nick coming up.
I'll be back for another night.
So we are just about getting to that point. We're going to give you a couple more quick things I want to touch on. They keep popping and keep happening up. But on the changing financing, I encourage you to read that text broker article that talks about that. Because there are good ways to do that and there are valid reasons to do that. You just need to understand, here's how we do that. Here's how we amend the contract. Here are the things in the contract and third-party financing we amend. Or from cash, any kind of financing is going to require third-party financing then to be added. Alex?
Well, and I want to point out, some people are getting confused. If you're doing conventional and you change what percentage you're putting down, but you're staying conventional, that's not changing finance. Some people seem to think that if you're gonna go in with 50% down and you change it back to 10%, you don't have to notify them of that when you're staying conventional.
It's
You
just
just have
like,
to been able to prove up the funds at the time of the offer.
yeah, as long as they can still close. We just had one where it was a good contract, conventional financing. And the buyer got a big bonus, with the big company he had. He said, I want to pay cash. And he said, so we need to change the contract? No, you don't do anything. It's all cash at closing anyway. So you
So
don't,
why are the cash options or cash deals more? They're taking more and desire.
yeah, as a matter of fact,
Why is that?
cash offers are taken 2 or 3 times as much as financing ones, and for all the wrong reasons. I see a lot of cash contracts either not close at all or not close under cash. I see a lot of that. So your seller needs to be really careful. Say, wow, these are great offers. These two are really good and they're both cash. You said, well, what they look like, we don't know. Now, make a judgment call on the kind of buyer you kind of sell you've got. How paranoid they get now, it overwhelms them and they freeze, they can't do anything. So you gotta make judgment calls, how far you go with that. But I need to understand, when they accept an offer, everything in that offer, it doesn't mean that's what's gonna really happen. It can change a lot,
But they close fast.
including it can change who's gonna buy, who's gonna close. You close with a different buyer. Our contracts in Texas are assignable. You don't need permission of the seller to do that.
It can remove the contingency if it's all cash, is the only reason why cash needs to be.
Well, you can, but you don't have to.
But you don't have to, but yeah, but that's one reason why people prefer cash, because it's generally one
Theoretically,
less
they have
out.
all those contingencies. What's crazy is you have listing agents let their seller take a cash offer and they don't make sure they determine proof of funds. Where's that money coming from? And then you find out after the fact, oh, you're getting the money from the sale of this house?
Yeah.
You know you had a house sale. Well, you didn't ask. And the lender wasn't going to tell us.
Right.
Are you about ready, Nick?
Whatever, I'm good, I'm listening.
Okay, so
Taking notes, so-
me too. I'm listening. Me too. So The only other you got two other addendums, actually three. Sale of other property by buyer. Here's what I want to point out on this one. We got a kill date in this. Paragraph A, that second blank is the kill date. If when that date hits, if the buyer has not satisfied or waived the contingency, then that contract, all like terms. Everybody have that? Addendum for sale of other property by buyer? Everybody have that? And what happens is, and it happens frequently, is the contract closing date gets changed. And they don't go back and change this date. And this date hits and that contract's gone. And that may not be what people wanted to have happen. So pay attention to this. Closing date changes. Go back in and amend this contract, item number 9 on the amendment form. Where the parties agree to change the date, paragraph A. Yes, sir.
You want to let them know what to do if that date has passed and then somebody brings it up?
Just had this. We just had this. And here's what, here's what we can't get the attorneys to agree on. Contract's dead. I mean, literally, the contract has terminated, and it's an automatic termination. So if a contract has terminated, the legal question is, can the parties to the contract bring it back alive?
Yes.
I've got as many attorneys in this room over here say, yeah, mutual agreement, if they agree to it, yeah, they can. I've got attorneys in this room over here who make good living. No, got to do a whole new contract. We don't have a good answer. It's what the parties decide they're going to do. We'll tell the parties, you see, believe advice on this. The convenient, easy thing everybody wants to do is, you know what, we just missed that. We never wanted the contract to go away. We just missed it. Can't we just make this little change and everybody's good? Well, I don't know if that's what your attorneys tell you can do. We don't know. I really don't know. There's not any position you can take in these contracts that I can't find a whole room full of 8 attorneys over here say, no.
So maybe consult with the attorney for the title company that you're closing at.
Yeah.
And say, here's what both parties want to do.
How do they do?
How do we do this?
Perfect.
And see.
Call Charles Kramer, Kelly Miller, and Don Moore,
Yeah, and whichever way they.
call Chase Garrett, people like that, say, yeah.
Or you have Marcia, your transaction coordinator, and she doesn't let things fall through the cracks.
She doesn't. Yeah, and that's a good point because Marcia would make sure as we're approaching this date and she knows closing is changed, guys, we take care of this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You feeling better?
No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The addendum for backup contract, I continue to encourage you. If you've got the buyer who lost out on the deal, get into a backup. And we've got it on our intranet, how to split up the option fee, the backup. So if the option fee is going to be 200, put $10 up now and the other 190 up when you get into the first position. That way the buyer is in that first backup position for $10. No reason not to do that. They got total control and that's all it costs you. Seller temporary lease. We do this all the time and we don't understand the risk. Huge risk, huge risk. Both seller and buyer, landlord and tenant, big risk. If you've got the seller in term, don't put a date in there, put a number of days. Because when the closing date gets moved around, you've got a date in there, your seller may not have 2 weeks, he may have 2 days. You just move the closing date around. Make everybody understands and agrees what you got going on. The addendum for property subject matter membership, I would encourage you to spend the time to read A, 2, 3, and 4, especially A, 2, and 3. Because what we automatically do is A1. But there are advantages to both the buyer and the seller, particularly if you're doing A3. If your listing agent has got all this information together and it's all ready, so that a buyer's agent has got all the information, yeah, we don't need an updated certificate, fine, just do like that. We could use an A3 is a better situation. And doesn't, and for such of a seller, it doesn't read that automatic termination right you have an A1. So be familiar with how those work. Yes, ma'am.
If the A1, wait, after the 10 day, if the title company deliver the HOA principle or things, find that I find this house cannot to be rental house. So
Buyer has 3 days to decide if they want to terminate or not,
I could terminate, right? It is 3 days after,
after receiving it.
okay, after everything. So I could take my buyer funds money back.
Well, hopefully the title company will do that. But our challenge is title company is one who has the earnest money. They're the ones going to decide. Okay, now, what we're going to do now, because I do have to go. Nick McCoy has graciously agreed to come in and talk to you about our agent hotline, and you've got some information right there. We have 4 agents who are manning the agent hotline, and we have it during the day and on the nights up till 9 o'clock, third call, and on weekends, from noon to 2 o'clock.
Oh,
I'm just kidding. Weekend again is, what is Saturday, Sunday is something till 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, officially, if you look on there, it says, I think from 9 AM to 9 PM. Just know that if there is a deadline to the question that you're asking, we'll try to get you an answer and get back to you as quickly as possible, but it's also helpful to know that. So if that's part of your message, your email, your text, whatever you're gonna send over, then that would be good too. But yeah, it's.
And so he's going to talk about some of our procedures, the whole concept of this. And we've got Nick, we've got Marcia, who's on the call. We've got Scott Scribner, and we've got Joe Martins. So the concept is that when you have quick questions, you got to access, you got somebody, experienced person who can either provide you the information, or they may say, you know what, that's attorney time, that's Bob time, that's whoever time, when you work through it. This really gives you a nice resource as you work through this. I think is great. Not many offices have this, but it's really good thing. So please give Nick your attention as you work through it, and we thank him very much for doing this.
Yeah, you're dismissed.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank all of you for being here.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
All right. Good.
Well, sure.
All right, I think I might have to exclude Larry from this, but I have a $5 Starbucks gift card for anybody who has the hotline number saved in their phone and can prove it. I think I saw you first. Yeah, prove it up. Let me see it. And how's your handwriting?
oh, I have it like this.
I've got it.
I love it. No. That's your winner. Win quick. Now, can you write that on the board for us? I'll do it.
I don't remember things that quick.
No, so we'll put the phone number up here, but
I can
again,
put it up there if you want me to.
oh, that'd be great. Good. While I'm chatting away here, I'll try to keep this short and sweet. So like Bob said, the hotline is made by Marcia during the day. Look at the schedule that was sent out there. Kind of gives you, I think it's the third page of those 3. So weekdays from 9 to 5, that's Marcia, unless for some reason she's out, and she will answer that. Then she switches it over to either Scott Scribner, Joe Martins, or myself. We operate on a 3-week rotating basis. And we'll take it Monday through Friday from 5 PM until 9 PM. And then on the weekends, 9 to 9, essentially. We may not answer first thing in the morning on a Sunday, right? So, or whichever. But what happens is the phone will ring, it'll come through, a voicemail will allow you to leave a message if somebody is not able to pick up right then. And if you look at the second page of those 3 that are added there, it kind of goes over what you should know and think through before you make the call, and it's going to make all of our time way more productive and will be very, very helpful at that point. So do you represent the buyer or the seller, or does our office represent both? So intermediary status, if that's the case, who's the other agent on the other side of the deal so that you're asking about? It changes how we're going to answer the question or give you advice. If you have a question about option fee and time frame and whatever, we're going to say, well, it's going to be better for the seller if you do it this way, better for the buyer if you do it this way. So who do you represent? So if you tell us ahead of time, that's very helpful. Are you in contract mode, or are you still in the offering mode? So we all know the difference between offers and contracts. Yes, nodding, great. Okay, so you're executed or not. And that's going to change our answer as well, because if you're making an offer on something, we might be telling you to structure the offer in a certain way. If you're already under contract, you're kind of bound by what you've already agreed to. So hopefully that all makes sense. Is this a procedure question or one involving specifically a contract or addendum form? And the reason why this is important is because we want to make sure that you've read that form. That's helpful too. So a lot of times, if you take the time, you read through whatever paragraph or whatever addendum, the answer will come to you. But if you're still unclear on it after you read it and you let us know, then we can be prepared for that as well. We can look at that up and make sure we've read that paragraph recently and we're able to tell you, because as much as we like to pretend like we're complete and total experts and we've memorized the contract like Bob, we haven't, but we've interpreted enough times that we know what the office would tell you to do in most cases. Is this a document question? Have you read, though? There you go. All the appropriate documents, question. If this is a procedure question, have you clarified what your clients want to do? And this is also very important. There's a tendency that we get where we see something coming up or a problem arises or we foresee a problem. And then we want to know what we can do first, which is good. But if you take the time and talk to your client and ask what they'd like to do after this, or if you already know, hey, they really want to stay in contract, but what they've done is just allowed for that to get broken out or something along those lines, you're going to want to try to have an idea of what your client wants ahead of time. So if it's a seller and they're like, I don't even like this buyer, I want to get out of this buyer. All right, well, that's going to help us guide you on how you might respond to whatever is coming up from the other side. That all make sense? And then who's the other agent in the transaction and who are the lender, title company, inspector, et cetera, as appropriate. So if you have a problem with a lender, it's good to know who the lender is. It's good to have that contact information. If it's another broker or another agency, it's good to know who the agent is on the other side. Is it one we've worked with before? Is it somebody that Bob has a relationship with the broker of that office? That makes a huge difference. We can say, hey, Bob, that's so-and-so over at, XYZ Realty, and you've talked to so-and-so and, how do they respond when their agents do this? And we can get that question answered for you a whole lot quicker. So that's the very basics of the hotline. When you call the number, it is a Google number, so there might be a little bit of a delay. Many times that gets rolled over to a voicemail. Please leave a voicemail. That then gets sent by email to the KW Plano help at Gmail number, which should be on the voicemail as well. Go ahead and email that. And both that and your response to these questions that will get sent to you all go to the agent that's on call. And so they'll have that in hand. They'll be able to look it over, listen to your message ahead of time. If they need to prepare for it, fine. If they just need to call you right back, they will. So that's the basics. Marcia, am I forgetting anything?
Nope, perfect.
Well, you'll never hear her say that again about me. Oh, Larry, right?
Clearly she's not doing that.
Yeah, I think she's just
What?
highly medicated.
Not enough medication.
So, yeah, that's the basics. Anybody have any questions about the hotline? What we do, don't do, what we can do?
Yeah, what about you?
Well, we're not going to tell you exactly what the problem or what the solution is if it's one where your client needs to make the decision on it. And I think that's the biggest key. We get that a lot, where we can give you the options of what could happen moving forward, but it really, really becomes, what does your client want? And then we can tell you whether or not you can get it, and whether or not you're just going to have to fall on your sword with the other side and ask for something outside of what the contract allows. But we'll level with you and make sure that you know what's what. And then as soon as anybody says, well, my client wants to talk to an attorney, we're out. No, seriously, we have to tell people that is, as soon as that word attorney comes up or something, okay. I can help supply you with information, but if you're talking to an attorney, I'm out of the advice and opinion business.
Right.
So that all makes sense? Good for everybody? All right. If you don't have the number, please program that in. Tell everybody if you're in the computer room or something like that, and somebody says, hey, what's that hotline number? And you have it, please share it with them. I've got it now where I just zap it out to people. The email address too. If it's not anything that's super timely, shoot an email over. That's fine too. We get all that stuff and it does get replied to. And if you ever have trouble with anybody getting back to you, just keep on trying. It's gonna come through to me, and directionally, if there's anybody else who can't call you back, then sometimes people forget. And on a timely situation, definitely just keep on trying, pinging us. So we'll get it done. All right. Okay, that's all I got. Short and sweet. Thanks a lot, y'all.
Thank you for being there for us.
Oh, you're welcome.
I have a birthday card to go for us because I want to sign.
Oh, cool. All right, what do I need to do here? Anybody know? Hi, everybody.
Kiss up to him.
Zoom link.
How was that you? It's already off.